Hello everybody, and this is Heather from Mrs Mactivity. Welcome to another episode of The Exhausted Teacher. This is the 4th episode. Please feel free to have a look through the rest of the series to watch the other episodes. If this is on Facebook, you can find that on YouTube. Or if this is on Instagram, you can find it on our Instagram TV channel. So I'm going to talk today, new video, new topic, about teaching abroad, because that's something that I've done. I know it's something that's of interest to a lot of people. So I spent 2 years abroad. I taught for a year in Japan and I taught for a year in Spain. And I just want to talk you through my experiences and then go through some pros and cons about doing that and kind of things to expect when you go. So first of all, I decided to go to Japan because I wanted an opportunity to travel, to meet new people, to sort of live in the world a bit and have an experience and an adventure. And I definitely did have that. And then after that, I decided to go to Spain just to get sort of back into European culture and have a totally different experience, and I enjoyed that too. I'd probably say I enjoyed the Spain experience more because I met a sort of wider variety of people. The Japan experience was different. It was more structured. It was sort of safer, more secure. But the Spain experience, I would say, was, and even now I was thinking about it with a sparkle in my eye, was something that I really hold on to and really treasure those memories of living there in that country. So it was really fun. So some of the pros. So actually, first of all, I'm just going to talk briefly about how you go about getting those jobs. So for me personally, for the Japan job, I applied via a government website called JET. So I think it stands for Japan Exchange Teaching. It was never really referred to after we arrived in Japan. After that, we were called ALTs, Assistant Language Teachers. You don't have to be a qualified teacher to do that. In fact, at the time, I was not a qualified teacher, and I'd never taught before in my life. Some people that went were qualified teachers, and I think they probably got more out of the experience because they were. You don't have to be. And then when I went to live in Spain, I was actually teaching English again, not as a qualified teacher. So it's quite a good grounding, I think, and made me really decide that I really, really wanted to teach. So I'd sort of tried before I did my PGC, which I think is really useful. Other people get jobs through, if you are qualified, through websites like TES, Guardian, sort of asking friends of friends. Always go with a recommendation, because some schools, particularly in the south of Spain, I've heard horror stories, people don't get paid, or it's not, the job isn't what you think it's going to be. So just be really careful, make sure that you do your homework before you commit to anything. So anyway, back to the pros. So this is just based on my experiences and things I've heard, but first thing is the money. So you do get paid more if you are a qualified teacher and you take up a post in an international school. On the whole, you will get paid more. It'll probably be tax benefits. Maybe you won't pay tax in that country. Just be careful though, because if you come home, you may be liable for tax. So just, do a bit of reading around that. If you're not out the country for a whole tax year, it can be a little bit difficult. So usually it's better paid than being in the UK. You can save up. Obviously, if you want to buy a house and you can't afford it at the moment, it'd be a great way to save up a deposit. That isn't the case in all countries. So if you were to go and get a teaching job in, I don't know, Poland, Spain, Greece, or whatever, you may not find yourself better paid. So that's not across the board. I think I'm thinking more of sort of Asia, Middle East, definitely would be better paid. Accommodation. So I had accommodation included in my contract, which has pros and cons, because you do feel a little bit like, sometimes used to wonder if they came into my flat when I was out. I don't think anyone actually did, but I have heard of people, lying in bed and someone walks in. So you do have to just make sure that you have privacy as well. But obviously it's something you don't have to sort out. When I went to Spain, didn't have accommodation. It was a right headache to sort. If you're a foreigner, it's always more difficult to sort these things out, isn't it? Resources. Often these schools, particularly the international schools, are really well resourced. They have money to spend on things. So arguably there'd be less planning to do because they buy schemes in and things like that. Not always the case. I have heard of international schools, even in UAE, where teachers are having to buy chairs and tables. So it just does differ from school to school. It looks great on your CV. So that's the next one. I know when I got my first post back in England, one of the things that they said set me apart was the fact I'd taught abroad, and that's why I was called to interview. So it really does look good. It shows that you got a sense of adventure and you're independent and, can think for yourself and you're not afraid to try new things. So that's definitely true. And even if you don't decide to stay in teaching, it still looks really good on your CV that you've lived abroad and maybe learned a language as well. I know that I did. I'm not saying I was, anywhere near fluent or anything, but I remember I went to Spain. I couldn't speak any Spanish at all, and then by the end, I could ring someone up and have a conversation. So, and I'm not good at languages either, so that's definitely a good thing. Freedom. So my understanding is that you have a lot more freedom from the national curriculum. Your school may follow a totally different curriculum or do whatever they want. You're not as tied to what the DfE want you to do. You can teach what, child-led and what the children are interested in and what you think is best for them rather than what you're supposed to teach them. I'm guessing that there's no SATs as well. I could be wrong. Or maybe some schools sort of decide to take them and some don't. The next thing, respect. I found that I commanded a lot more respect when I was a teacher abroad. People really sort of defer to what you think, which are good and bad things than that. But you don't get the sort of hassle and the chat back like, you sometimes do get here. On the downside, I'll go talk a little bit more about the cons. Sometimes I felt in Japan especially, this might be a bit of a cultural thing, that I didn't get much back from the kids. So although I didn't get like the chat back and the cheek, very occasionally I did actually, a few of the older boys. Sometimes didn't feel like I really connected with the children. They were very sort of, didn't want to have that relationship with the teacher that you sort of get with the kids here in the UK, where you feel you get to know them really well. But again, that will probably differ from country to country. I know in Spain, I built up a really good relationship with my students there, so maybe that's just in that country. Good professional development. So this particularly applies to UAE. I understand that in the UAE they really invest in their teachers, lots of courses going on. There's the whole GEMS thing, lots going on over there, and you can really sort of build that up. Just please remember to note and record all the CPD that you do ever, because I didn't, and it's a right pain to remember it, just there. Right, some cons now. So again, this will differ from person to person, place to place, but these are just things that I think will probably apply to most people. Sometimes you have to, in fact, quite often there's a commitment of at least a year. So if you don't like it and you're unhappy, you can find yourself a bit stuck. I know sometimes there's like, you can kind of get out the contract, you have to pay them back, or you don't get your flight paid for and things like that. And it just doesn't look good. It's not really fair to the school and to the children. So that's one thing, is that there is a minimum time commitment usually. Next thing is, it can be periods of loneliness, utter loneliness. And you kind of miss out on things. If your brother has, him and his partner have a baby, you miss it. You miss weddings, you miss funerals, you miss lots of different things. And I found myself, all on my birthday and things like that, totally alone. And it does force you to make an effort, but it takes time to build up that network of support, doesn't it? It's not something that happens overnight. So that's something to consider. You've got to be comfortable in your own company, which I luckily am, but just something to think about. Sometimes, depending where you are, I found my life wasn't my own. I felt like I was being watched sometimes, and people were judging me, and unfairly sometimes, and intruding a little bit in my personal life as well. So sometimes I'd have students like knock on my door in the evening, which I found really hard to deal with, because I needed sort of to be away from them, in a nice way, of course. But I think sometimes if you're a foreigner, people don't see you as a human. They just see you as like rent a friend, and that you should be always there to speak to them in English. So you might get friendships with people in your school, or the teachers perhaps, who want to learn English and just see you as a person to practice their English on rather than a friend. And that happens a lot. So you just need to be careful. Of course, you want to help people with their English, but not at the expense of you just being always on tap. So you need to have some boundaries there as well. You often find as well that you're, like I mentioned earlier, you're on show a lot, so you have to like be on your best behaviour all the time. So like sometimes I'd be feeling really grumpy and like I didn't want to chat, and I still have students like coming up to me in the video shop, as was then, trying to chat to me, and you're like, oh man, it's a Sunday. So that's just something to think about as well. So you just need to really guard your privacy. I guess the last thing for me was being out of the loop. So like missing out on stuff that's going on in the UK and not knowing like what's, what people are watching on TV, what music. And you can quickly feel like you don't know what's going on. And it doesn't take very long to get out of it as well. And it actually takes quite a long time to catch up. And that's something that I found when I came back from Spain, especially. I didn't know what had gone on, who celebrities were and all this stuff. Maybe not particularly important things, but with your friends as well, you've got a friendship group and then you move away and then you change and they change and you come back and you may not have things in common that you used to have. And so you have to sort of start all over again. And I think the other thing is when you move abroad, you always get culture shock. So it tends to be a bit of a graph. So you get there and you're really excited and you really embrace it and it's all really, really good and you're feeling really happy. Then you have a bit of a dip where you have culture shock, where you feel like a baby, you don't know how to do things, you feel really helpless, and that goes on for a while. Then you have another peak where you start to settle in, and it just goes up and down all the time. But what people don't talk about is that when you come home, you get culture shock when you come home as well, because you've got used to a certain way of life. So just, these are just things to be aware of. But overall, I think it's a really good thing to work abroad. New experiences, broaden your horizons, great for your CV. Hopefully earn lots of money, save up. Then when you can come back, buy a house or use it for travel. Meet loads of interesting people. Meet great kids, great teachers and colleagues and things as well. So go for it, definitely, but do it with your eyes open. It's not going to be this, 100% wonderful experience like nothing is it? It's going to be an interesting up and down experience, but definitely worth doing. So anyway, as ever, any comments, messages, questions, either comment, DM or PM me, and I'll speak to you soon.